Hello, fifth graders. I am here to go over your problem set with you. I know some questions that I had at the very beginning were, how do I figure out which problem set goes with which lesson? Well, notice at the top it says problem lesson 10 problem set. So we're working on lesson 10. Over here, the 5-5, that means unit or module 5 for grade 5. So if you're questioning where we're at, we're on problem set 10 for module 5. So we are going to get started on this. So before we left for this extended break, I'm so sorry that my videoing is a little bit terrible. We'll figure that out as we go. We were working on the area of rectangles. We were using whole numbers. You know that I always tell you I like to make math easy on me, so I'm writing down my formula right away. How do I find area? I multiply width times length. So for rectangle A, we are going to do a simple one. It is 3 units by 2 units. So for how many units long? Well, it's 3 units long, so I'm going to put my 3 right here. How many units wide? It's 2 units wide. In order to find the area, I am going to say 3 times 2 equals 6. So my area for number 1, rectangle A, is 6 units squared. Remember, we would normally make sure to label that, but they did that for us. Okay, let's move on to rectangle B. This is where it gets a little bit different than what we've done in the past. We've only done whole numbers, but we know that when we're measuring things, it's not always going to be a perfect whole number. A whole lot of us are stuck in our houses right now, and it gets kind of boring, so I'm probably going to use some references to things around me. I know that I have a rug in my living room that is 7.5 feet by, I think, 10 feet long. And so I know if I wanted to find the area of that, it would not be regular. So we're going to look at something like that. Here we see that this rectangle is 3 units long. It's 2 full units and then 1/2 of a unit. So I can go ahead and start filling in my information here. I know that my rectangle is 3 units long, and it's 2 1/2 units wide. Okay, how do I figure that out? Well, I'm really just trying to find how much is in here right here, right? So I could do the easy part first. 3 times 2, well, we already figured that out. That's 6 units squared, right? And so, but that's not the rest of it. I have to find, there's 3 halves right here. So I'm going to take my 3 times 1/2. If we go back to our last module, when we were multiplying and dividing fractions, we know that I can turn any whole number into a fraction by adding a 1 under it and then multiplying straight across. Remember, with multiplication of fractions, I do not have to have common denominators. I'm going to multiply straight across. 3 times 1 equals 3. 2 times 1 times 2 is 2. So we know that's an improper fraction. In 5th grade, as a standard, that is totally acceptable, but you know what? I'm never going to look at that rug that I was just talking about and say that it's 6 3/2. So I'm going to try to figure that out. Well, I know that 2 goes into 3 one full time, and there's 1 left over. So I have 1.5 units squared left over. In order to find the full area of this rectangle, all I need to do is add those pieces together, and then we're going to talk about how I figured that out. 6 plus 1 we know is 7, and then I have that half left over, so it's 7.5 units. Let's go back and look at our rectangle. I can find my 6 units here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So this 6 correlates to this 6 right here. And then I have 3 halves, which this correlates to this 3 halves right there. I know if I put 1/2 and 1/2 together, that's going to equal 1 whole, and then I have a half left over. So I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1/2. All right, let's move on to the next one. This rectangle C is 5 units by 1 1/2 units. So in this case, it is 1 1/2 units long and 5 units wide. So same thing, I can go. Terrible camera working here. Probably not going to be the next famous YouTube star. Sorry. 5 times 1 in order to find my, remember, areas width times length. 5 times 1 equals 5. I can go back and check my work here by going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 full units. Now I'm going to take my 5 units and I'm going to multiply that by my 1/2 because I know each one of these, remember, is just 1/2 of a unit, right? And I'm going to multiply that. So that equals 5 halves. Units squared. So how many times does 2 go into 5? It goes in there 2 times, so I can put that is equal to 2. And then I have 1/2 left over. So let's go back and check our work just like we did on this first part. I have 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1 whole. 1 plus 1/2 equals 1 whole. And then I have 1/2 left over. So now I can take that and add it together. 5 plus 2 equals 7. And I have a half left over. So my area is 7 1/2 units squared. Okay, let's move on to rectangle C. Remember, if this is too fast for you or you're not understanding something, we have linked those other videos to kind of help explain. You can pause and figure things out, or let your teacher know. So this one is rectangle D, 2 units wide by, 2 units long, I'm sorry, by 1 3/4 units wide. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my information here. I've got my 2 units long, 1 3/4 units wide. So I know I can take my 2 times my 1. 2 times 1 equals 2. I can check that off. 1, 2, right? Those are our 2 full ones, so that's 2 units squared. And then I have my 2 3/4. I have 3/4 here and I have 3/4 here. So I'm going to take my 2 times my 3/4. I know I can add my 1 underneath my whole number and make it a fraction, and it's still the same value. 2 times 3 equals 6. 1 times 4 equals 4. So I have 6/4 right there, units squared. In order to make that into a mixed number, not just an improper fraction, I'm going to see how many times does 4 go into 6. Oh, I know that goes in there 1 time. And 2/4 left over. So I'm going to add my 2 units squared together. 2 plus 1 equals 3, and then I have my 3/4 units squared left over. So the area of rectangle D is 3 3/4 units squared. Okay, let's move on to rectangle E, our last one on the first page. We know that the way Eureka works is that the first page or the first several problems usually are procedural problems. We're just practicing that procedure, and then as we go on, it gets a little bit harder, a little bit more in depth, and we'll see that as we move on. Parents, as you're watching this, I know this is different than a lot of the ways that we learned it. So just bear with me. I promise it teaches kids in more depth than we learned it. Okay, this one's a little different. So our length is only 3/4. We have no whole numbers, and it is 5 units wide. Okay, so I'm going to take my 5, and I'm going to put it over 1. Because I know I can take any whole number and put it over 1 and it makes a fraction. And I'm going to multiply that times my 3/4. I don't have to do the whole numbers first because there are no whole number ones to do first. So 5 times 3 equals 15. Oh, terrible camera working here. 1 times 4 equals 4. Okay, I could leave it that way and it would be acceptable, but that's really hard for me to measure in, and so I'm going to put it into a mixed number. 4 goes into 15. How many times? I want to think about that. You can count by your 4s. 4, 8, 12. So I know that that equals 3 whole, and then 2/4 left over. I also know that 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2, just like on my last one. So I could also write it 3 1/2. Remember, 15/4, 3 2/4, or 3 1/2 in 5th grade are all acceptable answers. And then remember, I do want to always label my answer units squared. So the area of rectangle E is, if you can see it, 3 1/2 units squared. But remember, 3 2/4 or 15/4 would all be acceptable answers here. Okay, just like I promised, this next page is where it gets a little bit more tricky. So these are where our word problems come into play. I want you to be thinking about either RDW, read, draw, write, or some of us were working on that solve method. But remember, whenever I'm doing a word problem, I always want to read that word problem really, really well and make sure I understand what it's asking me before I start. So this one says, the rectangle to the right is composed of squares that measure 2 1/4 inches on each side. What is the area? Its area in square inches. Explain your thinking using pictures and numbers. So first of all, I have to think about, okay, I'm going to circle that 2 1/4 because that's the numbers that it gave me. Now I'm going to box in some keywords. Rectangle, I know that's a rectangle. I'm thinking about my shapes. It's composed of squares. What do I know about squares? I know that squares have 4 sides that are the same length. So that means that if it's 2 1/4 inches here, it's also 2 1/4 inches here. On each side, what is its area in, oh, I know I'm looking, area equals times length. Remember, I like to annotate my problem, make sure I'm making notes in square inches, so that's how I'm going to label it. I'm going to explain your thinking using pictures and numbers, so I'm going to make sure that I have all of those parts in there. So, underline my question, what is the area in square inches? Okay, so in order to find this, guys, first I have to figure out what my length and my width are. So I have 2 1/4 here, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. So I'm going to take that 2 1/4 to find my length, and I'm going to multiply that times 4. Well, in order to multiply that, I need to make sure that that's in an improper fraction. 4 times 2 is 8, plus my 1 is 9, so that would equal 9/4 times 4. I'm going to put that over 1 to make it equal to, or make it into a fraction, equivalent fraction. Okay, so 9 times 4 is 36. 4 times 1 is 4. So now I have that this length is 36/4. Well, that's not easy to work with for me, so I am going to change that into a mixed number now. 4 goes into 36. How many times? 9 whole right there. 4 goes into 36 9 times. So my length equals 9 inches, right? Okay, now I need to find my width. So there was 4 here, there's 1, 2, 3 here. So I'm going to take my 2 1/4, because I know a square has same length sides, right? 2 1/4, and I'm going to multiply that by the 3 units times 3. I'm going to do the same thing there. I already did my math on this one, so it's 9/4 times 3 over 1. 9 times 3 is 27/4. How many times does 4 go into 27? Think about that. So it goes in there 6 whole times. That's 24, 25, 26, 27. So there's 3, fourths left over. So then my width, which I'm going to write on this side this time. Oh, terrible, terrible camera. That's why they pay me the big bucks, huh? My width is 6 3/4 inches. Okay, so now I can find the area of the total. We're gonna do it just like we did last time. So we know that my width is 6 3/4, so I'm gonna take my two whole numbers, 9 times 6. And what is 9 times 6? This is where we should really be practicing those multiplication facts, right? So 9 times 6 is 54 inches squared. And then I'm going to take my 9 and I'm going to multiply it by the 3/4 that I have left over. I'm going to put my 1 under here. 9 times 3 is 27. 1 times 4 is 4. Oh, look, it's the same thing. 27/4, so we know that that is equal to 6 3/4. And we can add this together. So 54 plus 6 is 60. And then I have 3/4 of an inch left over. So it's 60, make sure you can actually see it, inches squared. I know I didn't draw pictures like it is, but I did annotate the pictures over here, so that's what I'm using as my picture. If you want to draw a picture, then that to help you, that's great too. Make sure we're getting in those multiplication facts. This is where we're going to really notice if we don't know those facts. Okay, we're going to move on to number 7, which is a rectangle has a perimeter of 35.5 feet. If the length is 12 feet, what is the area of the rectangle? Oh, let's look at our, if we were doing our RDW, we would read it, and then we're going to annotate that while we're doing that. So 35.5 feet, length is 12 feet. What is the area? Oh, I'm noticing perimeter. We've only been working with area. So what am I going to do with perimeter? Let's think about what a perimeter actually is. If the area is the inside, the perimeter is the measurement of the outside. So making sure that we're remembering that the 35.5 feet is the outside. So I also know that I have a rectangle here. Feet is the units that I'm working on. I have a length, feet. Ooh, they want me to find the area and a rectangle. So those are my important words. My question is, what is the area of the rectangle? So in order to help myself out here, I am going to draw a picture. I'm going to draw a picture. I know that my total perimeter, P equals 35.5. I guess I should get this all in the screen for you. Feet. And that the length is 12 feet. Okay, how am I going to figure that out? Well, I know a rectangle has two sets of equal sides, so 12 feet over here. Okay. So, and I know that perimeter is the total around the outside. Well, I have some information here. I have the length of the two, and I know these two are going to be the exact same. So I could add these ones up. 12 plus 12 I know is 24. So I have 24 of those feet accounted for. So I could take 35 away from 24, or 24 away from 35 if I could say it correctly. And that equals 1, 1. But I have that half left over. What do I do to find out where that half is from? Well, I have 11, but I should have had a half over here, so I can't just bring that down because I'm taking away from it. Hold on. Or I can bring it down half. obviously late in my house. I can't think this morning or this evening. Okay, so at 11.5 feet, I can check my work by adding it at 4 plus 1 is 5, 2 plus 1 is 3, 35.5 feet. Okay, so I know between these two sides, it's going to be 11.5 feet. How do I figure that out? Well, how do I figure out half of 11.5? I'm going to divide it by 1/2. So I have 11.5. I know it's being divided into two places, so I'm actually multiplying times 1/2, right? Well, first I need to put this into an improper fraction. 11 times 2 is 22, plus 1 is 23 halves times 1/2. One times 23 is 23. Fourths, 4 goes into 23 how many times? It's 5. And I have 3/4 left over. So I'm having a hard time writing because nothing's holding the paper. 5 3/4 on each side. So now I know the measurements of each side of my rectangle. So now it's asking me not just to find the measurements, but to find the actual area. So I'm going to multiply my 12 times, so I'm going to look at my length and my width, right? We don't need to do all four, we just need one of each for a rectangle. I'm going to take 12 times 5. So that equals 60 feet squared. Then I have my 12 times 3/4 because I have to get the rest of that. So I'm going to turn that 12 into a 1. Or not into a 1, I'm going to turn it into a, put it over a 1 to make it an equivalent fraction. 12 times 3 is 36/4. So how many times does 4 go into 36? It goes in there 9 even times, 9 feet squared. And I'm going to take my 60 feet from that and my 9 feet squared there and get a total area of 69 feet squared. All right, that is the end of Module 5, Problem Set 10. Please email your teacher if you have questions. Go on Khan Academy, MobyMax, Prodigy, or Zern to help you with those. As always, we're here for you when you need us. Bye.